I think you and I both have cultivated this, but it's just like you learn that nothing is going to kill you. And as soon as you gain that belief, it's like you can smirk at any problem, no matter how big or small, and you're just like, we can figure this out.
When it goes back to the whole, like, worry about what you can control.
Yeah.
Like, it happened. Whatever happened, like, you're in the situation, you know?
Yeah.
When we had I don't know if I should talk actual company names. I think I referenced this the other week. When we had a company, withhold money of ours for a period of time, there was nothing. We were doing all the things they said to do to get our money back.
All right, I'll say
ours.
Held like $1 million of our operating capital, and we literally almost couldn't. We couldn't.
You had to wire
and I had
money.
to wire personal money to the business. How you doing, man?
It's been a fun yet exhausting week in many ways.
A lot of dinners.
Yeah. It was our strategy week.
Yeah.
So probably one of the most mentally exhausting weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, we came up with a crazy plan.
It was awesome. That was fun.
Crazy.
Got us to think differently.
Yeah. Like we, I think the biggest insight from this week is the power of buying businesses. Mm-hmm. Just, it's crazy, man. Because it's really hard to organically grow a business.
Even when you're doing it well, it's still, there's a limit to how much you can do organically.
And we mapped out this one model where it's like we'd have to hire like 200 salespeople or something, and then we could replace that by just like acquiring, like buying 3 to 6 companies depending on their size. It like we were saying last night, dude. We just got to start a private equity company.
That'd be fun. I think
it'd be freaking sit back, just
convince people to sell the businesses,
sell their entire, their entire net worth to us. You think we'd be hard on people if we ran a private equity company, or you feel like?
No, I'd be hard in the negotiations, but once we had them on board, we would treat them well. Yeah,
you would be the worst person to negotiate with, dude. You're like,
it's fun to me.
No bueno. Yeah, dude, it's like a whole different world, man. The Tony Robbins book that talks about. Mm-hmm. Did you read that whole thing? It's like the Holy Grail of investing.
Yeah.
He talks about like, it's like the number one highest return of like all other.
I forget what the percentage was.
I'm gonna look up a summary of it. What was your takeaway from it?
From that book?
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the big ones, right? I mean, that was why I think last week we talked about the whole accredited investor thing, right? Where if it's my money, I should be able to invest in what I want, and it kind of shows how that divide between the haves and have-nots, consistently gets bigger because you have to be accredited to be able to invest in private equity. And really, private equity, a lot of funds, the biggest ones, there's minimums of like 25 million, but the returns on them that money is insane. And private equity is a little more secure than like VC.
So high return private equity investments often aim to significantly increase the value of the companies they acquire, making them potentially lucrative. It's hard. So basically the whole concept of the book is that you invest in private equity companies. Yeah. You invest in the companies that are investing in other companies. And then there's like only a few ways that you can invest in a private equity company or a portfolio of private equity companies, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because, I think the cool thing about private equity, I think the good ones is that they actually add value to businesses, which is what I would want to do. I've always said, like, I don't want to sell, I want to buy. Right. And I think I would venture to guess that probably the best investors have a backbone of like having actually ran and grew businesses. Like it's really hard to just come from management consulting and have never run or scaled your own business and then go apply, if we were to buy a business and then we wanted to help that business, instead of grow 20% year over year, help that business grow 100% year over year, well, I actually know exactly how I do that.
Right.
Right. But if you only have like management consulting as your background, you've never actually done it. I think that's probably where it goes wrong.
Well, I think that's why private equity groups, they understand the financials and the investment side of it. That's their strength. And that's why they bring in operators, people who have run businesses before, to either help guide and consult those business owners, or if they need to at some point replace that leadership or have them built into the leadership team because they are the operators, right? They don't try to operate themselves, although some of them do. I mean, I think some actually take roles, but tends to be people who have had experience in it before. But I think one of the biggest things that is misunderstood about private equity these days, not that there aren't some out there like that, but to your point earlier, a lot of them want to add value. They want to grow it. They're not looking to come in and just decimate a team, remove things, cut people. I think that's like that whole corporate raider thing of like, the movie Wall Street that people think about from the past. But he was more of an activist investor, who just is looking to make profit, where private equity now I think sees the total sum game of, we can turn this in, $1 into $5 by doing what's already working and just helping accelerate it.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, dude, a lot of people don't want to be CEOs or like operators. It's pretty crazy. Like,
I think it sounds alluring until you get into it sometimes, and then they realize it's not what they thought.
It's insane. It's like if you were to ask 100 business owners, do you enjoy the responsibilities of being CEO? I would say 95 would probably say no, and 5 would say, hell yeah, this is the best freaking thing ever. I love the complexity. I love the high responsibility. I love having the financials of the company on my back. I love being, having every day be completely different and dealing with every surprise in the company. And, it's really not, and that is technically a more advanced form of entrepreneurship, right? As being a true CEO. I feel like a lot of people don't understand. I mean, most people in the United States don't run their own business, statistically.
Correct. Yes.
But everyone, if you were to survey 100 people and ask who don't run their own business and ask them, do you want to be a CEO? Do you want to run your own business? 95 out of 100 would say, yeah. But then 95 out of 100 of those who are actually doing it would say, nah, I don't want to keep doing this shit.
Do you think now there is certainly a phase above this where it becomes another type of challenge, but do you believe that is because most people want to be entrepreneurs because A, they think it's going to bring them more money potentially than what they're making, but B, because they want the freedom and they think entrepreneurship brings freedom, yet when you first start out, you realize the beginning phase of entrepreneurship is anything but freedom. I mean, it's, yes, you're deciding what you want to do, but if you want to be successful, you're actually working way more. You're responsible for everything. So there takes that, it's like what our clients, like we have to get them through that initial phase to that hump where they can finally have enough money to build a team, delegate, train their team up. And then that's when you can kind of start to have some freedom and enjoy it. And then it's kind of like, do you just keep that steady, or if you want to keep growing the way we have, then there's just a whole other set of complex problems and stressors for a CEO at the next level.
I think the perception of freedom is probably, and it's just freedom of money. I mean, it's just because what are the ultimate freedoms that human beings have? Freedom of relationship, meaning I get to choose who I spend time with.
Sure.
Freedom of time, I get to choose where I spend my time. Freedom of money, meaning I have no financial constraints tied to my decisions or what I want in life, right? It really comes down to relationships, time, and money.
Yeah.
And the way people, I think, conceptualize of freedom of time is freedom, right? And if I am my own boss, then I can just have all this freedom and do whatever I want. And just being your own boss is the most selfish thing I've ever heard. I mean, name me one great leader who is their own boss. Like, I just think that the term be your own boss is just like so selfish. It really is. It's like
I never thought about that.
like all the best leaders are servant leaders.
Right.
They're not their own boss. They are servants to a cause. They're servants to their team. They're servants to a mission. They work for others. They don't work for themselves. That's all the greatest leaders.
Right.
The leaders that nobody wants to work for are the ones that work for themselves, right? And you could probably work for yourself if you created, an e-commerce business that runs on autopilot, have one person running ads and,
Sure, do drop shipping and make it a little more passive.
You could work for yourself. That's the whole 4-hour work week model.
Yeah.
It's just the realities. It's interesting. The business skills required to build a business that runs itself typically come from building a business that doesn't run itself. It's very rare that someone learns to run a self-policing business without having built a non-self-policing business first, right? That would basically mean that if someone starts their own company, they wave a magic wand and their first business runs itself. Could you imagine that?
Yeah, it'd be very tough.
I'm sure it happens. Luck happens everywhere.
Sure.
Maybe, 1% of 1% of the time someone builds a business and that business actually allows them to be their own boss or whatever the hell that term
Or you
is.
just have enough capital or investment that you could just pay for everything to happen on its own.
And your business strategy's right, your marketing strategy's right, your sales strategy's right, all the people you hire initially are right. Like, just so rare. The only way you learn how to hire great people is by hiring the wrong people. The only way you know how to spend money in the right places is you waste money in the wrong places, right? So I just think like people who are seeking freedom, who haven't, grinded and not had freedom, or people who are seeking financial freedom but haven't gone broke or haven't, invested all their money in the wrong place. It's just typically scar tissue is probably the strongest teacher. I mean, you could read anything in a book. They say learn through other people's mistakes. That's true. That is the most efficient method of learning, is to learn through other people's mistakes. So you can read books. That's why biographies, like if you look at my top 50 book list, a lot of them are biographies. Like probably 60% of them are biographies. Because biographies allow you to learn from others' mistakes, right? But that's not enough. You can't just learn through others' mistakes and not make mistakes yourself, because if you don't have scar tissue, it's just theory.
Yeah, and I think, it's the reason we have our own coaches and consultants over the years, right? Is because I think the biggest missing component of that is learning how to identify that same principle or lesson in your own business, in your own life.
Yeah.
So you can read about it and say, okay, yeah. Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening in the moment. But when a coach or somebody who understands it and is outside your business a little bit can kind of tie it together. Does that make sense? Like, so if it's like, hey, we're having hiring problems. Like, well, I read this book about how to hire and find the right people, but it's just not working. And then if you can have someone kind of an outsider help apply those principles and identify when you're having these issues within, I think that helps. Like you said, you have to experience it, but being able to tie what you've learned and the principles to the thing you're experiencing is when it has the biggest impact.
Yeah. So that makes me think
because then it resonates and it sticks forever.
It's all about the reflection, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. I think Jim Rohn said that. That's everything. So I don't think many people have a reflection strategy for themselves, like a method through which reflection happens on autopilot. I think the best way to learn is to make mistakes and then immediately go through a period of self-reflection. But you're going to make less bad mistakes if you learn from other people's mistakes first. So if it was like a 3-step plan, it would be learn about other people's mistakes so you can avoid them. Then it would be make some of your own mistakes, which hopefully are going to be less severe because you learn from other people's mistakes, and then reflect. I don't think many people are willing to reflect. I think that it's a for some reason, it's like an ego hit for people. But I actually think the most powerful people that I've met are sometimes the most self-reflective. People with bulletproof characters that you would stand up for and that you really trust. They're usually more self-reflective. Not that they're always in a state like, okay, when I was in college, I was way too self-reflective and I wasn't taking action. So my self-reflectiveness didn't have power.
Right.
Because I wasn't taking action. And I always felt anxious about the fact that I was being too self-reflective. I needed to be at that time because I was going through a rebirth kind of. But I don't think many people struggle with being too self-reflective. I think it's usually the opposite. Just, I don't want to question what I'm doing too much. I'd rather just criticize others and say that they don't get it, or that, that way is wrong. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people, or do you think that's true? Do people not self-reflect enough?
Absolutely. I don't believe they do at all. I mean, not everybody, but I think it's a very small portion of the population, like whether it's personally or professionally, that probably takes the needed time to self-reflect. Because, I mean, yeah, you can learn a lesson. You can say, oh, we made this mistake, we're not going to do that again. Okay, great. But if you really sit back and think, I now have time in my calendar for Fridays to just sit down and do self-reflection of like, what are the things that went right? What are the things that went wrong? And not just take it at the surface level, but try to dig deeper into myself of like, is there something I'm not seeing? Is like, or the feedback I got from the team in my one-on-ones, were there anything that was consistent that I'm not addressing that I didn't realize is happening? And I think part of it is maybe just people not devoting the time or not just putting that as a part of a intentional process. And then the other part is probably ego, like you said, or the fear around actually acknowledging certain things. Like maybe people don't want to deal with those things, right? They don't want to have to address it. There's a fear around that perhaps. So it's easier to kind of just push it under the rug.
I once heard from someone, either you can be happy or you can be right. Choose one, right? And I think what that saying says is either you can try to be right all the time and basically, cause tension in not only yourself but also everyone you interact with, because you always have to be right, and therefore you trade your happiness for being right. Or you can prioritize happiness over being right all the time. And I actually don't think this is just about like mindless happiness or like being like a pushover and just like, when something's true, just going, okay, yeah, I just want to be happy.
Right.
Like, I don't think that's what that means. I just think there's bliss in curiosity. Mm-hmm. I just think, like, by the way, I heard this freaking awesome concept from someone who was at our last quarterly workshop in Austin. And I think I said it on stage at the event, that the number one sign of intelligence around an area or mastery around a specific area is curiosity. The people who are the best at something are typically the most curious about that thing. Whereas it's counterintuitive. You'd think the person who's like an expert at something, right, would be less curious about that thing because they've mastered it. So I don't need to hear any more crap about this thing because I'm a master of this thing. Usually it's the complete opposite. It's the people who are the best at something are the people who are still constantly learning about that thing.
Yeah. No, there's different levels, right? So you can be a master, and then there's like the next level master. And the people that are truly the best of the best are the ones that never stop. They're insatiable in their curiosity of it.
Yeah,
because you could argue, Steve Jobs, like with everything with Apple, you know, you could argue that, well, they were already the best at product launch, they were already the best at design or whatever else, but there was always a driving force behind how can we be better? How can we just improve this just a little bit more? How can we make it that much easier for clients and customers? Like
that, what a hard balance to reach. A hard balance of being introspective, being a constant learner, and yet remaining productive and action oriented. Because you don't want to go into paralysis. You don't want to constantly reflect, right? You want to stay in massive action mode, but infuse your actions with curiosity. It's really hard balance. And I don't think a lot of people, myself included, have found a solution to that. I more so go into reflection periods, massive action periods, reflection periods, massive action periods. Which is, by the way, what I think. I believe that, you know, I was diagnosed a long time ago with hypomania. And there's a book called The Hypomanic Edge, and it's freaking awesome. I've made videos on it. It's sick. It talks about, they looked at 100 of the most, not 100. They looked at many different entrepreneurs, right? And they surveyed them. I think it was a few hundred, and they all of the 100%. There's been no medical test ever that's proven 100% of people have this condition of a certain type. 100% of the entrepreneurs interviewed as a part of the research at the beginning of this book had, based on their answers to a test, they were all entrepreneurs, they all had a form of hypomania, which is fascinating because hypomania is technically on the bipolar spectrum, right? And it's such an amazing gift to have periods of time where you're flooded with dopamine, flooded with endorphins, and flooded with the positive happy hormones in your brain, right? Which some people call mania. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the manic side. Now there's delusional mania where you actually see things and, like, you know, and I've actually I have friends of mine who have had like actual manic experiences. My uncle was like legitimate bipolar and had like very visceral experiences in a manic state, where it's uncontrollable. Like he was talking to like the Mother Mary, like in front of our family, and like thought it was actually real in front of us. And but then there's this balance of mania where it's manageable and it's really just a ton of excitement, right? But here's my point. My point is that if a lot of the conditions that human beings have now been labeled by the medical system so that you can prescribe a drug to someone because we've now labeled them as having this condition, right? But if we go back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago and someone had a lot of excitement around something, I'm not talking about the mania level, but a lot of excitement about something for a period of time, right? Followed by a period of reflection and a little bit lower energy, that's a condition. That's not necessarily a disorder. That's just a human condition in some ways, right? So the reason I'm saying this is because, like, there are periods to take massive action and shut off your reflection brain, i.e. more manic, and then there's periods to reflect and to have lower energy and to ask deeper, more philosophical questions. I think that's a natural ebb and flow.
I would agree. I think this goes back into a few things. One, when you start to do self-reflection and dedicate time to it, you get better and better at it. So one of our core values is radical transparency, right? We have multiple times where we can give feedback to our team. If you go the furthest out from a time you could do it, it's at a quarterly review, right? But we always say, like, that should be kind of an overall review and feedback. If there's something you're seeing, you shouldn't wait to their quarterly review to do it. Then there's the weekly one-on-ones. You can do it in the one-on-ones. But ideally, if something happens in the moment, I should deliver that feedback as soon as possible. It'll have the greatest impact. It'll set in the best, and I don't forget it, right? So that's how you have the greatest impact for your team, is giving that feedback right away. Well, it's kind of like the same with self-reflection, because it's really feedback to yourself in a way, right? So if you start to schedule it, like say weekly, eventually you start to get in the mindset of reflecting on yourself and kind of critiquing yourself, that it starts to happen more rapidly. So then you can start to do it in the moment. And so I think, going back to these fluctuations, I do think everyone needs to have that. I think if you understand yourself and your tendencies and how you like to act and react to things, you can start to have some self-control, so that if you should be in a period maybe of execution, or that's what your business needs at this time, you can maybe pull back and rein in some things if you start to go too much strategy based. Like for example, like we couldn't do strategy week every week, right? We'd never get anything done. So we took this whole week to do strategy. Now we need to go into execution. If we find ourselves constantly going back into strategy, we can pull ourselves back and say, wait, we're going to dedicate time to that later. And I do think, to your point, that everyone has these ebbs and flows. I think everyone's just a little bit different. So for me, I book time, it's about calendar management, I guess is what I'm saying too. Like that self-control and calendar management. I book time throughout my calendar, either daily and or weekly, to have these periods of flows. And for you, like you were mentioning, you tend to go through them in bigger waves. I think mine are like smaller waves, like little ripples, where it's like I go up and down frequently.
Yeah.
And you kind of do it in bigger waves. So like you'll be in a period for a much longer period of time, and then go into the next phase, and then the next phase. It's very cyclical. Yeah. And mine's smaller. But again, I don't think one's better than the other. It's just how we operate. And so understanding how we operate and being able to like pull back when we need to or adjust is key. But that takes time to learn.
It really does. And it takes humility and vulnerability to learn. Yeah. It has taken so long for me to just trust my body, to just trust like when my body or mind is telling me I'm, feeling a certain way. There was a period of time, dude, when you first joined where the lows weren't like painful, from like actually physically painful, but the low periods that I had with reflection just, it didn't feel good. Like they just felt like, I don't know, they just felt unnatural. And I think looking back, in a period of reflection, if you try to will your way through that and be overly disciplined and like try to keep that energy up or do it in an unnatural way, it just drains you. Yeah. And it's really interesting because like ever since we had a lot of stuff that we had to figure out over the last couple of years, and over the last year or so, things have really like started dialing in, and it's interesting that I don't really have the lows anymore. Like no. It's just not, it doesn't feel unnatural when a low comes. It does like it did in the past.
Or I gave you this feedback, I think, in our last one-on-one. Remember I said like a few years ago, and you just said something about like forcing it. Maybe that was part of it, where when things happened, I could see your stress. I could feel the stress and pain you were experiencing trying to force something through it and to solve it. And now we can have something that's a much bigger issue because we're a bigger company. So when we have something that's not going right, it's a bigger deal. But yet you keep a much more even-keeled approach to it, and you just kind of absorb. We just go and attack it, right? Yeah. Like there's no like crazy anxiety or stress around it. Yeah. And I think it has come through your development. There used to be
in the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I've seen you develop over the years and be able to just approach things in a different way. And I think again, it comes from that practice you did.
I think you and I both have cultivated this, but it's just like you learn that nothing is going to kill you. Yeah. Like, and as soon as you gain that belief, it's like you can smirk at any problem, no matter how big or small, and you're just like, we can figure this out,
When it goes back to the whole like worry about what you can control.
Yeah.
Like, it happened. Whatever happened, like, you're in the situation, you know?
Yeah.
When we had I don't know if I should talk actual company names.
Yeah, maybe just,
but when we had,
name.
I think I referenced this the other week, when we had a company, you know, withhold money of ours for a period of time, we were in the situation. There was nothing. We were doing all the things they said to do to get our money back.
All right, I'll
willingly ours.
QuickBooks. All right, QuickBooks held like $1 million of our operating capital, and we literally almost couldn't. We couldn't.
You had to wire money.
I had to wire personal money to the business.
There were emails that were sent to an old email address to do some verification.
Yeah.
So we never got them, and so then they thought, well, maybe something's off. So, you know, for our protection, they started withholding the money and not transferring from the merchant fees. And
Crazy.
We filled out the paperwork 5 times over the course of like 2 or 3 weeks to send it to say, no, here's all the things you need to verify.
It was terrible.
And it kept delaying. They kept saying, oh, our system didn't capture it. You have to redo it. And all these different things. So it was what we were. You know, we were in that situation. It was what it was. We couldn't control it. And so I was like, what can I control? And so I used that one software and found all these executive email addresses and just blasted everybody, including their personal email addresses, I think.
We got into the president's office.
And one day we were in that meeting and I get a phone call and the recording's like, the office of the president of Intuit is on the line. Yeah. And I was like, what the hell? Like,
crazy.
It was nuts, right?
We got it solved,
we just figured it out. And that was probably one of the most stressful things we've gone through.
3 things that I reflected on as you're talking was these 3 traits of highly successful people. One of them is conscientiousness. Hard to pronounce. Conscientiousness. Very hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's a good one.
It's basically organization, dependability, goal-oriented, attention to detail, self-control, which relates to impulse regulation.
Right.
All right. So conscientiousness. I got to practice that. That is one of the most important pillars, which I want to emphasize the attention to detail part. Like, it's very hard to find you call it a detail hook. It's very hard to find a successful person who has no ability to pull up their attention to detail, right? Like, you can't make the excuse that, oh, I'm a low detail person. Like, I don't care about the details. Like, talk to any athlete who's world class. Talk to any world class, entrepreneur or someone who's making a lot of money and super successful. You're going to notice that they're conscientious. They are paying attention to every detail, even if they're not detail oriented.
Yeah.
Right? The next one is self-awareness. Successful people are more likely to be self-aware because that's the only way you learn. If you're not self-aware, then you can't look at your weaknesses and shore them up. You can't embrace your strengths. You're more likely to do things that you shouldn't be doing long term.
Agreed. Yep.
Right? And the third, and this is important because you could be conscientious, you could be self-aware, and that's actually a lot, that would be like a good, hardworking, humble person. But there's plenty of good, hardworking, humble people that don't become wildly successful. And one of the third ones, the third one that I look at is boldness, right? Because you could be self-aware, you could be conscientious, but then you can be worried that people are going to disagree with you,
right? Or
you could be worried that of rubbing people the wrong way, right? And you're usually going to see this balance of someone who's self-aware and bold is the ultimate combination, because you can now balance these 2 strengths, right? And you can attack with your boldness. You can clearly communicate what you want with your boldness, and you can do that in little sprints. And then you can embed all of that with attention to detail and self-awareness. But I think the boldness thing is often misunderstood. The 50 Cent once said when he was on the come up that people mistaked his confidence for arrogance, right? And I would venture to guess that most people who become successful had to toot their own horn a little bit, at least in their own mind, for a period of time, and then the market or whoever they were working with reacted to that. Maybe they tooted their own horn or were a little overconfident, too bold, multiple times. The market, then reacts to that, or the people they're surrounded with react to that. And then you find this middle ground where you can be bold, but you can still be emotionally intelligent. You can still not treat people like shit.
Yeah.
As
you were saying that was kind of the one thing I was leaning towards was the EQ, the emotional intelligence. I think it's very hard to have all three of the things you mentioned, right? There are plenty of leaders who have just been straight bold, who have been successful. They bulldoze people, their own team sometimes, vendors, competitors, whatever. And they're great salespeople, but they hit people over the head. They bulldoze through. And I think at some point that eventually implodes.
Yep.
They'll also never have the legacy, that they could have had if they had developed the other stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's fine. I mean, people are successful that way. That's part of life. But to be the best leader, to be that servant leader that you would describe, and the people that will leave these amazing legacies and train others and teach others to be the next generation of servant leaders, that EQ is really critical to be able to manage all three of those things together.
EQ is separate from IQ. It stands for emotional quotient. What is EQ?
I don't know the exact definition. You have to look that up. But I mean, it's really just understanding.
Coming back, ChatGPT. Let me
people in your surroundings. The way I view it,
all right.
Understanding situations, people, surroundings, and being able to deploy. Particularly as you develop, like we talk about everything being developing skills and muscles in business, and it's kind of like these weapons you develop right over time. And so, okay, I could develop these muscles or these strengths. And I can go just hit someone over the head. And if I'm in a sales situation, I can go just, hard close somebody and get them to buy something that maybe they're not going to get value out of. They spent too much money for what they can afford, et cetera, et cetera. Or I can develop all these strengths, be able to read the client, know to ask the right questions, and then take my skill sets that I've developed and approach the sale in a different manner where the client's begging for that sale. Right? Where the end they're asking me for the sale, essentially reverse it on them. That's what like truly skilled people can do, whether it's in sales or just running businesses or managing people.
Here's what it said.
So what's the definition?
So emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and use emotions effectively in oneself and in interactions with others. It's seen as essential to personal and professional success because it influences communication, decision-making, relationship building, and overall well-being. Unlike IQ, which measures cognitive abilities, EQ focuses on emotional and social competencies. Components of EQ: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills.
So the things we were just talking about. I think, IQ... I think they say you can train it up a little bit, but it's kind of more of an inherent thing, isn't it? It's just you're born with most of it. EQ sounds like something you can really develop over time. But again, it's not easy. It's very hard because those impulses, the things that want to come out, it takes a lot of patience. Like I'm not a patient person. So it's taken years. I've tried to improve my EQ over the years, and it's like from the time when I first started as a manager.
I just remembered when we were at I forget what restaurant it was. Oh, the wine. Yeah, the wine wasn't to your specifications, and I saw that impatience come out just very quickly.
To get very
is this
anxious.
Wine old?
Yeah.
I think it was last night.
Yeah, it was last night. I was like, this tastes flat. The bottle's been open for quite some time.
Yeah, I could tell in the back of his mind, I could tell his amygdala was...
Especially when you're at dinner, you don't want to seem like that guy, and you're just like, ugh.
Yeah,
but I'm like, it was driving me nuts.
Everyone was very pissed at how un-EQ you were. All right, so IQ is more fixed.
Yeah.
Biological basis, largely determined by genetic and neurological factors. Developmental window is early adolescence. through brain plasticity allows for some cognitive growth. Scope of improvement. Training and education can improve knowledge and skills, but the core cognitive abilities measured by IQ are more resistant to significant long-term change. EQ, more malleable. Social and environmental influence, development over time, especially with practice and training, and adaptability can be enhanced through coaching, emotional awareness, exercises. So yeah, you're right. I mean, EQ is more adjustable, and I would argue that if we had to give a point to each one in terms of like, if we had to give a percentage to each one in terms of what's more important, smarts
for leadership
or EQ, I would actually have 3 categories. Well, for success, just success.
Okay.
Right. You probably, if there's 3 categories, IQ, EQ, and action, how much action you take.
Yeah, the action I think is almost, but it's kind of like
required for both.
If you try to think of it in the same context of,
this is good when these people come by. It's
right.
Hopefully, if the podcast, grows, it'll become like
we'll get a better backdrop.
It'll become like a thing. I wonder who's going to walk behind them.
It's like the doorknob you used to have.
Yeah.
On our new doorknob.
Yeah.
These people
maybe we can
by.
actually start getting these people to wave when they pass by and like make it an actual.
We can bring them in and interview
formal
them.
thing, and then we can put their photo on the thumbnail. And just like, yeah.
Well,
I think we just got to own it, dude. There's a maintenance bay over it. So this is our office. We have like a section of the first floor of our big Class A office building.
Class A. You have to throw that in there because of what's going on back here.
Yeah.
Remind everybody, this is Class A.
It's very nice. But there's like a kitchen area over there, and I guess the
mail room's over there, the shipping's over there.
We should probably figure it out. We should take the cameras up and go interview them and see like what do you deliver, and like
a lot of deliveries.
What are your entrepreneurial beliefs? All right, go ahead.
But yes, I would agree. I think I'd add maybe like one more. So there's the action, which is like executing on things, which a lot of people just don't do. So I would agree with you. Mm-hmm. But if we took it into 4 categories, the other one is just that like desire, determination, motivation, grit, something in that realm, right? It's like you can take action, but you also have to like have the motivation to keep going and overcome those things. Maybe it's the grit or persistence. Yeah, there you go, persistence.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
All right.
Well, and I would say IQ is lower than EQ because IQ is important, but there are plenty of people who are not the smartest in their field, but they had the other 3 things. And, if I was just ranking IQ and EQ, I would say EQ is more important because the people who develop EQ, high EQs, which is very hard to do because you have to overcome your impulses and all your other things that, want to come out, but they're able to read the room the best, manage people the best, help grow teams the best, get people on their side. The high EQ people can get people on their side over time, right? Through being able to manage through that EQ. So that's, I think it's way more powerful. Because it's also just harder to develop. So a lot of people don't have that. Plenty of people have high IQs.
It says here that it appears that entrepreneurs have an average of 15 points higher in EQ than, I guess, but how does that apply to a high-level executive? Is that the same? Is this the same for high-level executives? Be interesting to see. Yeah, it actually seems like high-level executives in a company can be between 115 to 125, but CEOs are only 100 to 115. So it seems
is that
like
an EQ measurement?
IQ.
Yeah, I was gonna say okay.
But again, this is ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see. Like, I actually think it's very rare that the Bill Gates and Zuckerberg types that are like, calculating shit in their head, and extremely high IQ also, it's almost like they succeed in spite of their EQ.
Yeah.
It's like it's hard for them, but they're so smart. They come up with a business concept that's so disruptive that they're just forced to learn EQ, which
or
maybe,
they surround themselves with people with high EQ to lead.
Yeah,
the way
too.
he did with Sheryl Sandberg.
Yep.
That maybe she had a higher EQ.
It seems like IQ is it almost, if you fully leverage your IQ with action and persistence, then it forces you to learn EQ, or you just never learn it and you just own it. Because there's plenty of people with high enough IQ that never learn emotional intelligence.
Well, if they have a high enough IQ, they eventually learn, I need to have somebody with EQ on my team to be my right hand.
Or they learn, if they're high enough IQ, they learn how to disguise their emotional issues.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine. Like, bite my tongue. I just actually bit my tongue, but then I realized you can't really see that. So that was kind of self-inflicted pain for no reason. Ow.
That it is tough.
I bit it a little hard. There's like a chip on my tooth, and it kind of dug in.
BC, can you call Jen and have her make a doctor's appointment?
Yeah, jeez. Yeah, but I think that EQ is the exciting thing about emotional intelligence is that it is adaptable, and I also think that if you're high EQ, you learn faster because you're able to learn through mentorship. And I actually think the highest level of learning, it's close. You can get more information from a book. This is the difference between mentors and books to me. Is a book, you will get more information about a targeted subject from a book. A mentor basically is the equivalent of you picking up a book that's been 1 or 2 pages of the book have been highlighted crazy, circled in red, arrows pointing at it saying, look at these 2 pages and implement this in your business for your situation for where you're at right now. You never get that from a book.
Right.
You never get like, oh, just pay attention to these 2 pages based on your current situation. You never get that from a book. You do get that from a mentor. But if you have no emotional intelligence and you're boneheaded, people who are smarter than you are not going to want to spend time with you.
Right.
Therefore, you don't get the benefit of learning through mentors. And while that may not actually increase your IQ, because that's kind of fixed, it will improve your decision making. It will improve your information gathering. If you have bad information, dude, that's like putting diesel fuel in a regular gas car.
Yeah.
Right? Like bad information not questioned is probably one of my deepest fears. That's like part of the reason that I've become self-reflective is because I'm worried I don't know something deep down. And I hate when people say, oh, I'm not worried. I'm not scared. Like, okay, well, you must have no high stakes in your life at all because I'm still scared I don't know what I don't know.
The weird place my mind just went to is wondering.
All right, we got to censor it out.
Wondering. I'm thinking about the show American Greed as well as like cult leaders. Like, I bet you they're all decent IQs, but I bet you they have some of the highest level of EQs. Right? Because if they had the highest IQs, some of these people would realize, like the American Greed people, that, I could have done this a legitimate way and still been just as successful, if not more. Yeah. But they get all these people to follow them and to buy in, and they build these, like the cult people build massive cults. And I think it's just because they have high level of EQ. And so, not that I'm saying you should go do that, but I think it just shows the power.
Yeah, you could be a psychopath. You could have all of your values be completely destructive and rip people off. But if you have the ability to, as the book says, win friends and influence people,
correct,
right? Then that's scary, dude.
That shows the power of EQ.
Imagine someone with no emotional intelligence creating a cult.
It wouldn't happen. Nobody would follow you. Like, they would just realize how crazy you are.
I want to rip off people. Yeah. Follow me. It's just not going to happen, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, because in like the American Greed episodes where these people get people to invest money in things where it's like, there's no way this is legit. But they do it because they know how to read people. They know how to manipulate the situation through EQ.
I think like the Sam Bankman-Fried situation is kind of an like that. He probably wasn't high EQ. Not he's probably not high EQ, but in an industry like investing where you feel like, oh, I need to invest with this really smart guy. And he can't really talk to people well, but he seems really smart and he's on to something. That's probably the only place you can get away with it, you know?
Yeah, because everyone's competing on IQ.
Yeah.
And they're all very logical. And so they're just like,
100%.
oh, I want to be a part of this guy's team because he's so smart. They just want to associate with him.
Dude, you know what would be interesting is to do an experiment to see if we were, because I've been ripped off by an actual, like, legit Ponzi scheme, Trader's Domain. In fucking insane, dude. It's insane how that shit. My stomach's churning because of like the memories from that. And I never got any of my money back. $200,000.
And you never will.
Yeah.
Or is there no lawsuit? Or
the dude's in some other country. He's impossible to find. I mean, it's really fucked up, dude. If you look up Trader's Domain lawsuit, like it's. I mean, how much money was in that? I mean, he literally. How much did they steal? Yeah, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. There's over $280 million in stolen Ponzi scheme money.
Just from this one person.
Just from this one.
Is that American Greed episode? That should be.
I gotta reach back out to them or something. Like it seems like the Commodities Futures Trading Commission is like pursuing them for sure. Restraining order to protect assets and documents. Yeah. But it's just giving me PTSD. That whole situation evolved because this guy, I forget his name, Ted, his name is, he created this, fictional Forex trading thing. I was in a mastermind. All these people started talking about how their money was quadrupling overnight, and I delayed. I never do shit like that. So I waited literally 18 months before I just kept saying no. I don't invest in things you don't understand. All the Warren Buffett isms were going through my mind. And then Andy, my partner Andy, and a couple others like, yeah, dude, I've gotten my money out, no problem, like 5 times, and I made like more than my money back, and I got my money out, and it was no problem, right? And that's how they get you, right? And then the Ponzi scheme started breaking right when I invested.
Once it starts breaking is
once I invested my money, it was literally the worst time to invest the money because almost everyone else in my group got more than their money back.
Wow.
From the scheme because of how many people were throwing money in.
Sure.
And then I tried to get my money out, and now it's been like I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, nothing. But that is like, it is so fucked up to me that it is just so unreasonably insane that shit like this happens, and you can't do anything about it because they're in another country.
Yeah.
And like, his company is like domiciled in like some crazy tropical island, and just because of that, like
non-extraditable.
What is that? Why can't they take this guy down? I mean, they take down freaking terrorist organizations. Why can't $280 million? What? Why can't
if he went to a country that they can't extradite, certain countries have laws around that where they won't extradite back to the country where either they're from or where the country where they committed the crimes. Most I believe countries that are a part of like UN and everything else are probably they will do that, many of them, but yeah, there's still countries out there that won't. So that's why these people go hide in these particular countries, but then they just have to hide out forever.
It's just mind-boggling.
Well, it just shows how EQ is so powerful, but it can be used for good or bad, right? Good or evil.
Yeah, it's really mind-boggling.
Another example is the WeWork guy.
What What about
Remember
that?
the WeWork founder?
I never heard about him ripping people off. I heard, I mean,
Well, he was
went
like
under.
taking the money, I believe, well, maybe we should look it up so I don't misquote this, but I believe he was taking the money, invested in real estate, and it basically like caused the collapse of WeWork. But he's getting new investors and something else right now. It just shows that he's able to convince people he understands what people want, and he's able to convince them.
The founder?
Yeah, I forget his name.
Engaged in business practices that raise concerns about conflicts of interest, particularly regarding real estate transactions. He personally purchased properties and then leased them to WeWork, which is called self-dealing. This arrangement allowed Newman to benefit financially from both his ownership of the properties and their leasing to WeWork. Such practices led to investigations by the SEC. While these actions were ethically questionable, there was no public evidence or a legal finding that he stole money. The investigations focus on the property propriety and legality of his business dealings rather than outright theft.
Yeah. So that's why he's able to keep going, because he didn't technically commit crimes, but it was very shady, and caused a lot of issues for WeWork. And they're not the company they once were, I think, as a result of it.
How do you get to a place where you just start blurring lines in business like that? Just like one little unethical decision, and then you kind of rationalize it, and
you reap the benefits of it in certain ways, and it takes over. I mean, it's just the whole classic story of good versus evil, right? So I think it's a lot of it's set probably early in your development, just like IQ said, what values you have were set by your family or experiences, part of your development as a child, and then that can still modify over time, right? But hopefully your morals and principles are strong enough at a younger age that they're ingrained in you so much that you don't deviate from them even when you're tempted.
So interesting that how you live with knowing you're doing something shady, to me, is mind-boggling. Like,
the guilt would be tough. I could never do that.
For me, like, the only equivalent I have of that is when I had first learned, after my family went bankrupt and both my parents almost committed suicide or attempted, I went through crazy anxiety. And that was the period of my life where I felt I was being inauthentic with people. Because I did not want to share with others what I was going through and how I was feeling. And that was the most icky feeling ever. Like, until I was able to open up about that, and that was after years of seeing a psychologist, I finally was like, okay, I can be open about this, because I made sense of it in my mind that this was really just a response to what happened, blah, 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 blah. But for years, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell, like, my mom or, people that I was, very close friends of mine had no idea. And I held it with me everywhere I went, every single party I went to, in school, everything. It was in the back of my mind constantly that I am not being authentic about my current state. That is the worst freaking feeling ever. And that's why part of the reason I become such an open book is because I can't, I'm dead serious, dude. If you've ever wondered that.
It de-stresses you to get everything out.
Yeah. Because I've associated my survival with being an open book. And it actually ends up being great in negotiations, because it's like, oh my God, this guy's being so transparent. It earns a ton of trust, which is very different from your approach, which is like suit salesman, what do you think about this? Oh, have you thought about that? Oh, we're not really interested, I'm just more like, here's what I want, here's what I don't like here's my thing.
You throw your cards on the table.
Yeah. And I think that that's come from deep-seated years of feeling I was hiding something, and I don't want to feel that feeling again.
Well, then the good thing is everyone here today can rest assured you could never be one of those American Greed episodes, because I can't imagine the stress they feel every day knowing what they're doing, or they just don't feel it because they're that arrogant, delusional, and psychopaths that they just don't care about anybody. I'm sure some of them are that way, but I don't know, can you just imagine that stress every day, knowing like how many people you've lied to and how big of a scam you got going?
I mean, it's just got to be.
That would drive you nuts.
It's just denial. I'm sure there's a psychological way for anyone to get
compartmentalize it.
Yeah, to compartmentalize it. I mean, there's got to be a psychological method to be in denial about anything.
It's probably the only way you could deal with that after a period. I'm sure in the beginning the guilt and stress is very high, and then you learn to compartmentalize to deal with it, because otherwise it would eat you alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, denial is much more than just a river. Ever hear that before?
No.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Just I'm gonna do
stick to being CEO.
By the way, what's it like when you were a suit salesman?
What's it like?
Wait. I just like saying the word suit salesman. It sounds so shady.
Sounds shady. How's that shady?
So you would just reach out to people on LinkedIn and just go like,
yeah, it was the old school days of cold calling.
Are you insecure with what you're wearing?
I never used the word insecure. No.
What was your opening line to get people to meet with you?
Man, it's been so long. What would I say? It depends. It depends on what it is. I mean, my buddies would joke because I lived in Chicago at the time, and we'd be walking down the street and we'd be going to dinner or something, and then all of a sudden I would disappear, and they'd look back and there's a guy getting out of his Bentley. And there I am, getting his information, giving my card, but I always got their cell phone and email.
Yeah.
So someone like that, I just be like, oh, nice car. I can see you appreciate fine things. Let me ask you, where do you get your suits? And just start a conversation. And just, look, I make fine clothing. I don't want to waste your time right now, but I'd love to get your information so I could send you more information. And then the key was, as soon as you do that, as soon as you say that, you just look down and open up your phone to start putting the information in. And just don't make eye contact. And then they feel uncomfortable. So then they just give you the number.
Oh,
it's a good trick.
Wow.
Yeah. If you're like, hey, because you don't say, can I get your number?
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say no, right? The Chris Voss thing. It's very easy to say no. I wish I'd known the Chris Voss techniques back then.
Yeah,
but
would it be unreasonable?
But I would just say, yeah, I'd love to get your information. I'll send you some stuff, and we'll set up a time. What's your cell phone? And then I just open it up, and then they're like, some people would be bold enough to say no, but usually it makes people feel uncomfortable.
Interesting.
They just give it to you. Yeah, so that was one of them. But I would LinkedIn, cold email. We used to do door knocking, so I'd go. If I had an appointment, I would go early. And back, this is security wasn't as tight in some of the buildings. Well, in Chicago it was tougher. When I was in Columbus, it was a lot easier. And I would just, if I got into a building to say go to an appointment at 2, I'd get there at 1:30. And I'd look at whatever the list is of all the people in that building, right? Now, we're not talking necessarily high rises, more like mid rises, where you could just go floor to floor. And I'd just walk in like, hey, I'm meeting with so-and-so on the next floor. Yeah, I do all their suits up there. I just wanted to drop my information. Is Mike in the office? Because I'd look up who's in the office there. And I'd love to meet Mike. Is he here? I could just shake his hand real quick. It's very old school sales.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I learned from some of the best.
Looks like I'm going to change my business. I feel like I'd do good at that. Although it seems like I'd have to find a way to more efficiently prospect at scale without doing door knocking. That's so inefficient nowadays.
Yeah.
I guess maybe not.
Well, I mean, I was only just arriving earlier, so it wasn't like I was going out necessarily all day, every day, except for when I took new people out. But then, I mean, I was just, I lived alone at that time. When I started in Columbus, I moved across the country. So I'd go out, I'd work, I'd come home, and I would just get on LinkedIn and look up law firms, financial firms, whatever it was. And I would just create my own lead list all night till about midnight. And then the next morning I'd get up and just start calling them all.
All right. Well, that's it today. I like this not having like a formal topic, just kind of more organic, Brandon, before every podcast, he's like, what's our topic? It's like, Either I'm not going to
I love how it makes it seem, VC, like I'm like freaking out. All I say is, hey, do we have a topic? I don't know.
Yeah.
The extremes.
Right. Well, this is episode number 3. Peace out, and let us know what you want us to talk about in the next one. And keep flexing in the mirror 24/7, 365. See ya.